And welcome back. We are in round 5 of the Paragon Games Onyx Open. We have Ivan Schroder and versus William Dyson, who we just had in the feature match. This is for the winning in top 8. I'm Virginia, and we've got Ben Bradley here taking you through round 5.
This should be an interesting matchup. Very different in this situation where last game we had Merfolk kind of playing as the aggressor, the one to build the pressure.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the roles reverse now. Merfolk will be the one wanting to be a bit more controlling and to establish a board presence and hope Affinity doesn't get to apply the blistering fast pressure that it usually does. William being on the play is very good for Merfolk. When Affinity's on the play, your hopes of winning game 1 diminish greatly.
How does Merfolk play the control-y game?
This is where the strength of Merfolk comes, is that it can be both an aggressor and play a reactive game. It comes from having creatures which interact favorably with what opponents do, while also having various forms of bounce and removal and disruption from spreading seas to cause issues.
Spreading seas.
So, looks like this is a slow start from Ivan. Just simply playing a Vault Scourge without paying life. And there's already a William going to get a quiet question to the judge. But yes, this isn't the start Affinity hopes to get. Usually want it to be a little bit more explosive on turn 1. Especially if you've got a Mox Opal. You always want a Mox Opal. But to use your 2 mana only for a creature that... Vault Scourge is usually just a 1-drop. And to use it just for the sake of gaining 2 life, essentially, is unfortunate. And it means likely Ivan doesn't have one of his powerful 2-drops in his deck, or is sandbagging it for later. Which, I'm not sure why you'd want to sandbag it in this matchup, because I think you want to be... They have some removal in Merfolk, but not too much. And I think this list, by the looks of it, doesn't have main deck dismembers. So that definitely means there's nothing for Ivan to be afraid of in terms of his creatures dying. They can be bounced, but they can't die.
Yeah, you think if any play, he would just want to spew out his creatures as fast as possible.
Yeah. So probably what this means is Ivan just doesn't have that great of a hand.
Yeah.
Here comes the Lord, which will deal 2 damage. Will lead to the Curse Catcher dealing 2 damage. Lord not as great against a deck which doesn't play islands. I don't think Ivan's playing the Thoughtcast Affinity, which does play the occasional singleton island. But so I don't think that's ever going to come up. So he really needs a Spreading Seas to ever give his creatures evasion, which is a problem because Affinity is very good at spewing out a lot of creatures onto the board. So we'll have to see how that affects the matchup. So Ivan counting up his options. Affinity involves a surprising amount of maths.
Yeah, it really does, doesn't it? There's all these triggers, battle cry triggers.
I'm just an aggressive deck, right? It's easy. It's not. And there's the Cranial Plating. So that's probably what he's counting. This is Cranial Plating on your lifelink creature is a bit of a beating. And considering all of his mana sources are artifacts, that is 6+ power given by the Cranial Plating, so 7 damage overall. So that's a 14-point life swing in an aggressive matchup where you're racing. That is incredibly difficult to deal with. Yeah. 13 life already for William, and he really needs to find himself something like Harbinger of the Tides. Again, this is another good matchup for Harbinger of Tides. Basically, any creature matchup is great for Harbinger of the Tides, and any non-creature matchup is awful for Harbinger of the Tides. Some of the more competitive lists recently play 0 Harbinger of Tides. Some play 2, some play 4.
And I assume it's a bit of a meta call?
Yeah, it is.
Whether or not you start putting them in or not?
Definitely is. This one plays the full 4. So William definitely set out a plan to have a creature that deals with other creatures.
Yeah, and Canberra is relatively creature-heavy meta.
Yeah. There are the occasional non-creature decks, but even against some of the linear fast decks, like it's still great against things like Infect. It's great against.
That's true.
It's playable against Burn. It's not a bad card. Some decks do like to play Tideminder Mage instead because there's a better matchup against Jund.
Yeah.
But like Harbinger Tide still does fine in that matchup. So looks like William did some damage in response, played a Phantasmal Image in the process, so he dealt quite a bit of damage. Both of his creatures attacked for 3 power. And he's holding up one island. One island can signal a Vapor Snag, which is very good against Cranial Plating because once they declare their attacks, that's when you Vapor Snag them.
Yep.
And the Cranial Plating does nothing. Yeah. So Ivan is got a very creature-light start, but he's got artifact heavy, as the deck may reflect. So that Vault Scourge is just getting bigger and bigger.
Going to attacks.
Oh, so he's moved the Cranial Plating onto his Memnite, which is interesting. And he's offering up the trade of the Memnite for the Phantasmal Image if he attacks like this. Interesting choice. I would have thought getting the lifelink is high value, but I guess he's wanting to play around the potential Vapor Snag. And he's just attacking. Is he just going to attack with Memnite? If he does, this is a very strange attack. I think it is giving a lot of respect to what William might have. In my opinion, I think it's giving too much respect. Like, yes, they do have Vapor Snags. I know William has 3 of them in his main deck, but I don't think you get that blown out by it that you'd want to sacrifice the potential of just doing another 14-point life swing. Well, the damage goes through.
Damage. Yep.
I guess William doesn't see a way he wins without his Phantasmal Image.
Yeah.
Which is real problem. 4 life, that is not a high life total against some flyers and a Cranial Plating. Looks like just by some of the hand motions, William might be a little bit frustrated with the situation. Guess we'll have to see. This is a second feature match in a row. It's got to be a bit taxing on you mentally, especially after losing the first one. A little bit of pressure. But we'll have to see. So 2 mana here.
Oh,
there's the Spreading Seas.
Yep.
So now his creatures do have evasion. But the problem is he doesn't have lethal on board by any stretch of the imagination.
He's not really in a position to race at the moment either.
Yeah. And also his mana is very awkward. When you have 4 lands and 2 of them Mutavaults, that severely diminishes the amount you can do in a turn. Because sometimes you want to just go 2-drop, 2-drop. But when you only have 2 blue sources, and a lot of your spells are double blue, all your Lords are double blue, your Harbinger of the Tides are double blue, your Kira is double blue. That really, it almost feels like not having a land. And it is definitely the downside to Mutavault. Like, you still play your 4 Mutavaults, like the card is amazing, but it isn't without its costs. And there's an Inkmoth Nexus. That can threaten just lethal on its own on a different turn. This is getting increasingly out of control for William to handle. And there's an Arcbound Ravager. Because if things didn't need to get harder, ladies and gentlemen, it has gotten harder. And here is the Arcbound Ravager. He's starting to sacrifice permanents. He's got another Mox Opal. Ivan has effectively gone hellbent and used all his cards. But as Affinity, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So he's going to move the Cranial Plating onto one of his flying threats. Well, technically that card is not flying. Oh man, Signal Pest.
Okay.
Signal Pest is not a flyer. It just can't be blocked by non-flying creatures.
Pseudo flying.
Yeah, pseudo flying. So I'm not sure that is a legal block. We'll have to see. We'll have to see what's happening. I don't believe you can block the Signal Pest like that. Maybe. Either way, I think Ivan's dead. Not Ivan. I think William is dead regardless, but maybe worth like checking into. Yeah, like this is still lethal, created by the Arcbound Ravager. It doesn't matter anyway. It scooped him up. He had the lethal anyway there.
Yeah.
That's still a win for Ivan, and doing what Affinity does best, which is win game one.
That's true, right?
So this is the sideboard of Ivan. He could look into bringing in things like Gut Shot.
Yeah.
Gut Shot is
Killing the little dudes.
Yeah.
They get big.
Just using your mana as efficiently as possible against a Merfolk is always great. Girapur Aether Grid is more for grindy matchups, but it does a very effective job of pinging away at the Merfolk creatures, but maybe is not quite what they're looking for. Almost certainly bringing in Dismember. Just having removal spells is great.
Yeah.
Thoughtseize is something Ivan might bring in game 3 when he's on the play.
Yeah.
But Thoughtseize gets a lot worse on the draw against Merfolk because he can't hit Aether Vials.
Right. Do you reckon that's the main card that he's worried about, an Aether Vial?
Aether Vial is certainly, in terms of just cards in pure raw power level, is the highest power card in Merfolk. Yeah. So definitely the card they're most afraid of.
Okay.
And out of the other cards, he might also bring in a Collective Brutality, Whip Flare. Actually, Whip Flare is 100% coming in. That card can do a serious amount of work.
Yeah.
And Etched Champion is a good way of finishing games, which he could consider as well. And Spellskite is also worth considering. All in all, there are a lot of good options for Ivan here, which is surprising because you don't really think of Affinity of having good options in terms of sideboarding. And he doesn't want to sideboard too much, so he has to really prioritize what he values the highest. So now looking at the Merfolk sideboard, he probably wants to bring in the 4th Vapor Snag. He'll bring in the double Dismember. Pithing Needle is very relevant against a lot of the activated abilities of the creature lands, of the equipment like Cranial Plating. Definitely worth bringing in. And Echoing Truth is also fantastic if your opponent just floods out the board. Just being able to bounce more than one thing back is also great. I don't see any reason to ever bring in Mirror Regery. In fact, I'm surprised to see it in the sideboard.
When would you bring that card in?
I don't really know. I usually have 2 Regery main deck and 0 in the board because I don't ever see reasons to board in Lords. I think it's probably more you want to be boarding them out in certain situations. But I guess they're in situations where your opponents probably have almost no removal, maybe it's worth considering. But in this matchup, even though his opponent has almost no removal, a 3-mana spell isn't very relevant.
Fair enough.
So it's probably for the matchups where you really just want to kill them quick. Get them good.
Now on the play, game 2, afterboard, do you think William will change his game plan at all?
So William, it's probably mostly the same. He's definitely going to go on the play. And eventually have to deal with the game 3 play. But this Merfolk list doesn't necessarily have a great sideboard for Affinity. It's alright. It's got a lot more. He can board in a lot more disruption. Because he is more of the controlling deck now. But yeah, so Will has chosen to play, which is definitely the correct thing. I guess I could see a world where he chooses to draw because he knows he has to play against Affinity on the play anyway, and he could just see value in letting Ivan play first. And no, there's no reason to do that. No, you definitely just go on the play. Ignore me. Well, Ivan, if he loses, isn't going to say, "Oh yeah, you let me go on the play. I'll let you." Don't mind me. Scratch everything I said previously. That was not relevant.
I mean, Ivan's a nice guy, but I don't know if he's that nice.
Yeah, exactly. Ivan still wants to win. All right, disregard everything I just said. But no, for real, this is going to be an interesting matchup, and we'll have to see how this goes on the board.
Now, how have you, again being a Merfolk player, have traditionally found this matchup? Do you like it?
No. No, I don't. Like, especially with this sort of lineup, like some Merfolk decks, they splash white. It's actually very easy to splash white in Merfolk to bring in like to bring in Stony Silence as an anti-Merfolk card. But this is the pure blue version, which seems like the easiest. It also is a bit more budget as well. This is a budget list by the looks of it, slightly by William.
Yeah.
Because he isn't playing Cavern of Souls or
okay.
the Kamigawa lands. But it's a tough matchup regardless.
Yeah.
Because Affinity is just that deck where it just is more explosive than you. And you have to be the one to answer. And blue isn't great at removal, it's more at bounce. And the problem is all the creatures in Affinity are really cheap. So, and the creatures that aren't cheap, like Etch Champion, you can't bounce that. You can bounce Master of Ethereum, that's probably the best value you're going to get in terms of mana. But there's real potential at Advanced Sides out to Master of Ethereum. But I don't think he would. The card's still great.
Yeah, so I guess like even though Merfolk tries to play a tempo game, it's kind of like, well, you can't really out-tempo the Affinity deck in terms of speed.
It's hard to out-tempo 0 mana spells, is the answer to that. When things are free, tempo doesn't really matter anymore. So, yeah, this is definitely a tough matchup for Merfolk.
Yeah.
Merfolk is one of those decks where all of its matchups are kind of in the realm of 60-40, depending on who you're playing against. There's almost no matchups which are, I instantly lose the game. I think the only ones are like the very linear Stormstar decks are really tough to beat. But you can sideboard in against them. But it also doesn't have any matchups where it crushes. Like, I think its best matchup is probably Tron.
Yeah, that sounds fair.
But yeah, So William probably knows this. He probably knows this isn't the best matchup. But it's not impossible. So no 1-drop again for William. This is definitely not what you want for a Merfolk deck. You want to hit either the Curse Catcher or the Eighth of Isle.
And Ivan would be pretty happy to see not a turn 1 play.
Oh my goodness, yes. Whenever you're playing against Merfolk and you don't see a 1-drop, you are like, oh, I get to play fair Magic. This is playing against a weak fair aggro deck. And speaking of fair, as Richard Garfield intended, there's a turn 1 Arcbound Ravager along with creatures. So Ivan doing the Affinity thing of let's spew out our hand and see how good it gets.
Let
and
me
the
play
answer is, this
unfair
is
Magic.
Arcbound Ravager, of course, probably one of the best cards in the deck. It's just so difficult to remove. The one thing that does remove it very low, funnily enough, is actually bounce. Bounce is actually very good.
That's true.
You do, like, it can just sacrifice itself if they really want the counters. But you can force out situations where they don't want to be sacrificing it, and it just does have to go back into their hand. And in those situations, you're a little bit upset with the situation. And of course it is 2 mana, so having it bounce back to your hand, it is a relevant cost for Affinity. Like, while Affinity's cards are cheap, it also doesn't have that many mana sources. Or I say as Ivan has 3 mana worth of sources on turn 2, and very cheap spells. So there's a Signal Pest, and then activating the Blink Moth. And he's attacking in. Is it just for the 1? Oh yeah, of course. He doesn't want to trade the Arcbound Ravager here with the Silvergill Adept. As said before, Silvergill Adept is one of those cards which is great for churning through your deck. It is a relevant body, but it's a low impact card. It's still just a 2/1, which has some synergies within the deck, but you have to build up those synergies. And it becomes a lot harder to build up those synergies without an Eighth of Isle. So here's the Lord. So if he had an Eighth of Isle here, he would be getting these things out much faster. So the Lord is nice, although the problem arises with the fact that he still doesn't have Evasion because he doesn't have a Spreading Seas out yet. So until he gets a Spreading Seas, which would be nice to Spreading Seas the Blink Moth, he's still in trouble.
Relatively slow start from both players, actually.
Yeah. Like, this is about as good of a draw as Merfolk can ask for with no 1-drop. But that said, that start isn't what you want. Like, that isn't... Oh, that is a Whip Flare in hand. Oh my goodness, what a blowout. Yeah, that is going to kill both of the creatures. You don't normally see Affinity getting those 2-for-1s, but we did mention that was 100% coming in from the board, and that is soul crushing for William. Yeah, Whip Flare is not a fun card to play against with Affinity because, of course, it doesn't damage any of Ivan's creatures. It just damages Merfolk. Like, Whip Flare might as well read deal 2 damage to all Merfolk on the field because that's essentially what it's doing here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and now completely clear board. Ivan can do almost anything he wants, and there's going to be 0 pressure from his opponent.
Yeah.
There's no Mutavault on the play, so he's not even taking 2 damage from Mutavault. I would put Ivan's chances of winning this game at a very high percentage.
Is Whip Flare something that a Merfolk player kind of can play around, or?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, you can play around it, but you gotta actually build up the board first.
Yeah.
Like, what you need is 2 Lords in play.
Yeah.
Because if you have 2 Lords in play, then it doesn't kill it. But if you have 1, it kind of kills everything.
Yeah.
So, that is unfortunate. I could have seen, if he had... It looks like he had that Vapor Snag up. He could have Vapor Snagged his own creature there to save it.
To save it, yeah.
But I guess he sees more value. Maybe he's got more replacement level of creatures and just sees value in disrupting what his opponent's doing. Did he target the Ornithopter?
No, I think he targeted Ravager.
Oh, okay, so... Okay, yeah, so Ivan is choosing whether he wants to start sacrificing creatures to things. And it looks like he's sacrificing both his Ornithopter and then his Arcbound Ravager to put 3 counters on his Signal Pest.
Yeah.
So he doesn't lose out on too much damage. And he still has relevant threats on the board. The risk here is if he has a Harbinger of the Tides, Will might be back in this game. Harbinger of the Tides would be a fantastic draw. In fact, Harbinger of the Tides would also cause real mana problems because you'd have to activate the Blink Moth to use the Mox Opal. Alright, there was no play there. And only 3 land. So I have no idea what William has. He might just have a bounce spell that he wants to cast. Yeah.
Would he choose to flash it in this turn rather than play it?
Okay. Well, he can't play the Harbinger because the Harbinger's 4 mana. He only has 3.
Okay.
But yeah, so he had the Echoing Truth, which he wanted to make his opponent spend mana on the creature land, so he can't replay. He can replay the Signal Pest, but basically use up their turn.
Yeah.
And he only lost 1 health there, so, and he got rid of all the counters. Yeah. So that's still very good for William.
Yeah.
William is back in this game. He just needs to be able to find more mana to draw more cards. Aether Vial is nice. Like, it is late. That is a very late Aether Vial, but it is definitely nice to have now. Like, sometimes Aether Vial is not a better late than never situation, but this is a better late than never.
That's good.
It's not a turn 1 Aether Vial, but it is an Aether Vial.
Yeah, it seems that the pattern with William in the feature match area actually having late Aether Vials.
Has he had a single turn 1 Aether Vial?
I don't think
No,
so.
he hasn't. In the entire 5 games he's been on coverage so far, he hasn't had a turn 1 Aether Vial, which is just tragic.
Yeah, whereas you see Rory getting 3 flips off a Delver.
Yeah.
Life is not fair.
Yeah, the variance can be a cruel friend, enemy, everything. In this case, it's cruel.
Yeah.
Alright, so Spreading Seas again. So he's taking out all the creature lands.
Yeah.
Another Aether Vial. Now that second Aether Vial definitely has diminishing returns here. The first one, like, it's not the end of the world to have 2, but the first one definitely was good. So Ivan's just passing. Ivan can actually do nothing. He played a 3rd Blink Moth, so he can start attacking in the air future, but it looks like William can just start playing things, and by playing things, put the pressure on. I am really shocked William has been able to come back into this game.
This is amazing. After a Whip Flare as well. Damn.
Yeah. This has been incredible. Ivan has had a series of poor top decks, and William has managed to put himself in a position where he's quite threatening. So, attacking for 2. very unlikely. He can flash in a Harbinger of the Tides if he wants. Is he going to do that? He does.
Yeah, looks like it.
Fantastic. Yeah, not flash. He Aether Vials it in.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he can bounce that land back to his hand, and he takes 0 damage because the 2 damage was coming from the Battle Cry effect on Signal Pest.
Oh, this is looking
Yeah,
very
he's rolling
promising for
up.
William now.
Yeah. And there's a Mutavault. That's more pressure.
Yeah.
And attacking in.
There we
He's
go.
hitting for, doing math, 6 damage. Is there a considered block here? There is. Is this a chump? It is. I'm very surprised. Surely there's something more to it, because 2 damage isn't all that much. Like, he can probably afford to take a tiny bit of damage now.
It looks
So
like
for
that's
that-
what he's decided
Alright,
to
he
do.
decided to. He activated it by the looks of it. No, he didn't. Okay, he chose not to. Well, either that or he wasn't punished for it.
Yeah.
And William passed the turn. So William didn't have a play, but honestly, you can pass the turn and have 2 Aether Vials up, and your opponent's still terrified. Whether you do have something or not doesn't necessarily matter. It's the pressure of it.
Yeah.
So, not paying life for the Vault Scourge, because that life is very relevant right now.
Is that
that is another Harbinger
Harbinger?
Tides, but he's not using the effect. I guess he realizes that his opponent is probably never going to have tapped creatures while he's on the defense from here
Yeah.
on in. So you might as well just get another body in
Yeah.
and start attacking. Oh, they're just talking about some rules things. All right, we're good. Almost certainly activating Mutavault here. If he has another Lord which he can flash in, I think he'd be very happy. Actually, I think that could even be lethal. Yeah,
Oh, there we
actually, I
go.
think this is just lethal on board. Yep,
Yep,
and Ivan scoops it up. Yeah, spreading seas, allowing for the lethal.
Wow. What a comeback that match was
Yeah,
for William.
I had very high odds for Ivan to win after that whip
was
flare
great.
and pressure.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, shutting down the creature lands, which were where a lot of the pressure was coming from Ivan.
Yeah.
And then Ivan just drawing blanks, just drawing lands, and William deciding to draw fantastically, get some Lords on the battlefield, get some Harbingers to deal with it.
Get some good
And-
variants.
And
You know?
and I think the other downside was the sacrifice of the Arcbound Ravager. Choosing to sacrifice it and put the counters on a creature
Yeah.
ended up costing him when half of almost all of William's disruption in his deck is bounce.
Yeah. Kind of put all these eggs in one basket.
Yeah,
like that.
so
Yeah.
William basically, when he bounced that Signal Pest, got he got a 2 for 1 and like got tempo and mana
Yeah.
advantage.
Yeah, that's true.
It's very good value. So we're going to game 3, and of course this is the game where Affinity gets to go first. He might
Yeah.
want to consider bringing in Thought Seizers against potential Aether Vials,
Yeah.
but I honestly don't think that's too high value. But if he feels, I just don't want to deal with a turn 1 Aether Vial game,
Yeah.
that might be a consideration
Do you
worth
think
making.
Affinity could race a turn 1 Aether Vial?
Oh yeah. Affinity can always, with the right hand, Affinity can race almost anything.
Yeah.
But like you'd rather not play against the Aether Vial Merfolk deck.
Yeah.
Because again, the amount of mana they end up gaining, like the weakness of Merfolk is that to build their synergies, it's very mana intensive, and Aether Vial basically halves the mana that you have to put in. Looks like he's siding in some Pithing Needles, William is, to be able to deal with those pesky creature lands, as well as the Cranial Platings and Arcbound Ravagers. There's a lot of good targets for Pithing Needle. I'm actually surprised that they weren't brought in last game. Maybe he didn't want it when he was on the play because he wanted to be putting the pressure on. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
So do you think William's trying to slow down even more for game 3?
I don't necessarily think adding in the Pithing Needles slows him down.
Okay.
Because again, it's just a 1 mana spell, but it's a 1
Yeah.
mana. It's almost a 1 mana removal spell.
Yeah, okay.
That removes any future threats as well.
Yeah.
And is also hard for his opponent to deal with.
Yeah.
And it deals with the threat that's present. Like there are some things it can't deal with. It can't deal with like an Etched Champion. It can't deal with I guess just beat downs from signal pests,
Yeah.
ornithopters. Like if they just spew their hand of 1-drops and
Yeah.
then just beat down, it doesn't really do much there. Oh, looking like a nice start so far.
Yeah.
He's playing a 2-drop.
Typical Affinity start.
Yep, Steel Overseer is the 2-drop of choice this time. Python Needle does deal with Steel Overseer. So if he has turn 1 Python Needle, he could very well consider naming Steel Overseer. But no, there's the turn 1 Aether Vial play.
Finally!
This is 6 games in of
Yeah.
watching Merfolk, and only now, game 6, we have a turn 1 Aether Vial. He's
What a
actually
game
going
to
to
do
get...
it in.
He's actually going to get to play real Merfolk.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Merfolk as Richard Garfield intended
yeah.
it. So,
This is great.
yeah.
Getting the turn 1 Aether Vial in the winning in game
Yeah.
that both players need
Game
for top
3.
8.
However,
Wow.
this is some serious pressure being applied by Ivan. He's just spewing the board with lots of creatures. He's probably going to activate Steel Overseer. And he's going to hold on to it. I don't necessarily know why he didn't activate Steel Overseer there. Maybe there could be a reason that I don't know of, but I would have thought he would activate it there while his opponent has no bounce effects, no real anything. Interesting. Like, because he might have missed a point of damage, but maybe I'm just not as knowledgeable of what he might be playing around. Benefit of the doubt, he's the pilot. So there's Silver Gill Adept, revealing Lord of Atlantis. Lord of Atlantis looks a lot sweeter when you have an Aether Vial on play. Also, that's a Python Needle draw. That is maybe a little late, but you're certainly not unhappy to see it. So here comes the Steel Overseer. Counters everywhere.
Yep.
And it's only going to be more soon. So the damage that's coming in is quite immense.
Yeah.
This is a lot of pressure for William to have to deal with. He might have a turn 1 Aether Vial play, but this is Affinity being like, hey guys, and there's man.
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Affinity.
If there are children in the room, cover their eyes. This is a very
Oh dear.
this is not PG-13. But wow, incredibly aggressive start from Ivan.
Yeah, and I guess this is what you're talking about. Like, even if you have the turn 1 Aether Vial, the speed of Affinity is just it's so just oppressive.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why it's like a staple tier 1 deck of the format.
Yeah.
Not many decks can do this sort of pressure so quickly.
No.
Just vomit your hand and just use all of the synergies.
Yeah.
Because, like, basically, and this is kind of why I stopped playing Merfolk, I feel like Affinity is basically Merfolk except with
On
turn 1 Aether
steroids.
Vial every time without even having to worry about it. Like, the only thing you have to worry about is bad land draws.
Yeah.
So now he's activating Steel Overseer main phase. So he's getting in a lot of damage. This looks like 2, 5, 8 damage. 8 damage coming in. 3 of which is lifelink. No, it's more than that. No, it's not. It's not 8 damage. It's actually, yeah, it's more than that. It's, let's see. It's 10 damage. Yeah, 10 damage. For lifelink.
Oh, down to 9.
Because of the battle cry. Yeah, 10 damage it is. And already, William needs some pretty spicy top decks here. Spicy plays to get in. So you can play effectively 2 creatures and a Python Needle if he has 2 2-drops. If one of those creatures is a Harbinger of the Tides, then maybe he can keep himself alive in this game and get some favorable blocks happening. He needs to bounce the Steel Overseer. I think that's the most important thing to bounce, but that Arcbound Ravager is incredibly frightening, especially with the number of counters it has on it now. So there's Python Needle targeting Steel Overseer.
Yeah.
So rather than bouncing, he's just going to say, look, no more of this Steel Overseer shenanigans.
Yeah, stop
Look,
this, please.
Look at that Steel Overseer waving and stuff. I don't like that. I'm not a fan. So that Steel Overseer is relegated to just being a 2-mana 3/3. Which when you think about it isn't too bad. Especially given this board state.
Yeah.
But at least it's not 2 mana, give all your other creatures tons of damage.
Which it kind of already has done.
Yeah, Steel Overseer has done its job.
Yeah.
It's just not going to work overtime.
Yeah.
It's not going to
It's
get
clocked
that.
off.
It's not going to get those
Yeah.
penalty rates that are dreamed of.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit of a tragedy. But it's an embarrassment of riches here for Ivan. That is for certain.
He's certainly looking very comfortable where he is.
Yeah. I don't want to say Ivan's in a great spot. I can't say I lives here because I cursed him last time with that, and but this time I think it's even more so. He does have to play around some certain things, like 2 mana open and an Aether Vial open is a real threat. Like if William had a Harbinger of the Tides, this would be great. He knows there's a Lord in William's hand, which can come out from the Aether Vial. So
Yeah.
he already knows something he has to play around. But I wouldn't be too afraid of the Lord in this situation. It does mean that a Silvergill Adept would be able to trade with one of the 3 power things. 3 toughness things, I mean. But yeah. Yeah, Ivan, all he needs to do right now is tap everything sideways and
Send into the red zone.
and it looks very favourable for him. So, creature coming in to say hello from the Aether Vial.
Yeah, it would
Probably.
be Harbinger?
Oh no, it is Harbinger
Yeah.
of Tides. Very strange then that he decided to hold up 2 blue mana and not play one of his other creatures last turn. I guess he wanted to reflect a counterspell. Or maybe what he's got is he's got either an Echoing Truths or a Vapor Snag. So we're seeing what he's targeting. He's targeting the Arcbound Ravager. So now he's got to consider whether he wants to sacrifice things. I guess what he could do here is Arcbound Ravager. Yeah, I think Ivan might be worried of just having that move. And now, if William has a bounce spell, he can target the Memnite. And then he's actually not in too bad of a spot. Good play by Ivan of putting the counters on the least valuable creature on the board. The Memnite is the weakest creature he has. And so having the counters on that means that if William does have a bounce spell, all of his options are kind of depressing because there are 3 other things he wants to be targeting with them. Yeah, this is... and the other tough situation right now is the fact that none of William's creatures trade.
No, they're in chump duty.
Yeah, they're in pure chump duty.
Yeah. If he
it's-
does have a bounce, what would you bounce on this board?
You have to cast a bounce spell here, but I'm not sure how. And why is he blocking the Steel Overseer here? I guess... Yeah. Oh, there's some discussion here. Something's up. I guess, he's bouncing like that. But he already had... I would have thought the Signal Pest is the highest value thing to bounce. I guess this prevents the most damage. Like, on a pure damage prevention level, this prevents the most. Because Signal Pest is dealing the least damage of all the creatures.
Yeah.
But Signal Pest deals the highest potential future damage. And he also wouldn't have lost both his creatures if he blocked the Signal Pest. So... questionable block, but not necessarily a bad block. And there's just when things are looking potentially okay for William, this happens.
He still has 3 cards in hand.
He does.
Sure.
There are options available. Again,
Yeah.
Harbinger of the Tides is going to have to do some serious work.
Yeah.
He might need another one. So he ticks up Aether Vial. So either he has a 3 mana creature, or he needed to, he wanted to save up for something like a Master of Waves.
Right, yeah.
If he was wanting to tick it up, there's consideration for activating Aether Vial in response to the counter effect, so he can play one of the 2 mana cards, and then still have his mana open. The reason for this is the Merfolk deck has very few 3-drops. But has a ton of 2-drops.
Right.
So sometimes you want to roll it up because you've got a Master of Waves incoming, but you want to save the mana, so you activate for 2.
Okay.
Spreading Seas on the artifact land, that weakens the cranial plating, but that doesn't seem like a winning game plan. So it looks like he does have a 3-drop, and he is playing it. It's a Merrow Regery. Interesting. I think he's just dead then, unless he has a bounce spell.
So this was the card that you were not so
Yeah,
keen on?
I think Merrow Regery is a great 1 or 2 drop. Okay, so here's what happens. Oh, yes. Oh, he's going off. Okay, so what Mirror Readery reads is whenever you play a Merfolk, you may tap or untap target permanent. And he decided to untap his Aether Vial. So potentially he has another 3-drop in hand. And if that 3-drop is Kira, then he can block a flying cranial platinged threat.
Okay.
However, I think that's his only out. He has no mana open. If he'd untapped, say, an island, he could have played a Vapor Snag.
Yeah.
But I think now this situation is one of staying alive and... Yeah, okay. He just reveals he hasn't got it.
Yeah.
Scoops him up. Really unfortunate for William to lose basically 2 win-ins. Sometimes the variance doesn't go your way. I definitely thought he had a lower than average luck in these matches. And let's not discredit Ivan. Ivan played fantastically in these games. He navigated some tricky board states very effectively and has managed to pull through in what's likely a win-in for Ivan to make top 8.
Yep.
We'll have to see how his breakers go, but it's certainly been well played. As for William, it's unfortunate. He's not making top 8 this time, but he's certainly a great player in the community, and I'll be definitely looking out for him to do well in future Paragon Open events.
Yep. And William, because he did win the first Open, he has already qualified for the championship. So he's purely playing for points at this stage. So he shouldn't be too down on himself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And points are what helps determine where your seeding is in the top 8 in the future. So at this point, he already knows he's at the championships. It's just where is he seated in those championships and how best can he you get, because if you're playing something like Merfolk or even another aggressive deck, being able to go on the play,
that's true,
guaranteed is not bad.
It is quite an advantage.
Yeah. And Ivan showing us how good of a player he is today, just piloting Affinity in great fashion. And the Affinity players have done well this tournament. I know multiple other Affinity players were on undefeated records earlier in the tournament. I don't know where they stand now, but they're certainly looking like they're in great shape to do well. So well played by both players, and we've definitely gotten to see some fantastic games.
Absolutely. Looking for the top 8. And we'll round out our round 5 coverage. I'm Virginia.
And I'm Ben.
And see you guys later.